Realistic, Dakota Rail, that part of the Dakota Rail will probably never get.
Oh, you don't know about that.
It depends on how it comes.
Is it the heat? Finally, I don't. A nice donation from Jason. Is this for?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good.
He's a nice guy. Really good, nice guy.
Right. It's up to you. Yeah. You have Hutchinson. Imagine.
How much was it?
500 is what we.
It's up to you.
Keep it there. You got it.
This is a busy area too. I mean, Century is always busy.
I mean, if you're Century's busy, you know, as the development gets built up here, Sherwood will get more and more busy.
Right.
But Denver getting plugged.
I know that there's a lot of traffic on Fifth Avenue.
Sure, your ringer's out here, Steve.
I guess I've never seen that many people walk in. Maybe it's because.
Well, I mean, I ride my bike up the hill all so I could get on these. But then I tend to switch it up. Sometimes I like it. You know, the Veterans Parking across.
Do you think it has all that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Ranch Avenue, that goes back to Plum, and that's all gravel.
Yep.
But that's, but the trestles are.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hutchinson City Council meeting for Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. Approve the council agenda and any agenda additions or corrections.
Mayor, Council, I don't have any additions or corrections at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve it as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to approve the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Next is invocation from River of Hope Church.
Good evening, Mayor Forcier and City Council members. I'm here to lead the invocation, the very thing that's one of your agenda items this evening. And as a way of doing that, what I want to say is I believe God is already amongst us. God is with us, whether I am here as a clergy person or not. I think God loves the work that you're doing and calls us each to do the work that we do in this community. And I think that God cares about what you do, and God cares about our community of Hutchinson. And so with respect to my beliefs as a pastor, I believe that the work you do is important, and I believe that God thinks it's important too. And so as a way to acknowledge that belief that I have about the power of God being in this room with or without me or any other clergy person, I would just ask for us to breathe together into a moment of silence. And if you're the praying kind, to pray. And if you're not the praying kind, to ask for guidance, to be clear about the work that you do as people serving our community. And so let's join together in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, Recognitions of gifts, donations, and community service to the city. Does anybody have anything?
Well, I wanted to thank the city of Hutchinson for replacing the flag in front of City Hall.
Had I known you were specifically relating to that, I could have told you it was actually already on schedule to be replaced.
And all those others around town that have done that for me, so.
No problem.
I just wanted to thank the leadership group that did a lot of the work in the park, mulching. They also painted the basement in the little historic church. So thank you to that group that works hard to make our city much more beautiful.
All right, I do have one resolution, number 14891, a resolution accepting cash donation from Jason Lewinsky for a restroom at the dog park.
Yep, Mayor and Council, Jason, I believe, reached out to our Parks Department because he had interest in making sure to see that there was a porta potty at the dog park, and so he generously, I guess, paid for the cost to provide that at that location. So I'd like to thank Jason for that.
Yeah, it's a good addition, so thanks. So
Have
make
a
a
motion?
motion to receive that.
I'll second it. Motion by Steve, second by myself to accept the cash donation. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Citizens addressing the council. I do see that I have quite a few people, and this will be on the agenda, so probably at that time I'll be taking comments from the people at that time, unless there's somebody else that wants to address the council on a different subject.
You're talking about just the invocation, Tom?
Yeah, invocation and moment of silence. All right, approval of minutes, regular meeting minutes of May 8th, 2018.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by John, second by Mary to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent agenda, this will be done by one motion unless somebody pulls it off for discussion. Appointment of Morgan Baum to the Public Arts Commission to August 2020. Consideration for approval of issuing temporary liquor license to River Song Music Festival on July 13th and 14th, 2018, Masonic West River Park. C is consideration for approval of short-term 3-2 malt liquor license to the Knights of Columbus St. Christopher Council on June 15th and 16th, 2018 at McLeod County Fairgrounds. D is consideration for approval of issuing a short-term gambling license to the Minnesota Hosting Thespian Breeders Association on November 17th, 2018 at the McLeod County Fairgrounds. E is consideration for approval of disposing of surplus equipment. F is consideration for approval of resolution number 14894, resolution approving the vacation of a portion of easement at White Hawk Village, Outlot A, Hutchinson, with favorable Planning Commission recommendation. G is consideration for approval of resolution number 14890, authorizing to execute Federal Aviation Administration and Minnesota Department of Transportation airport layout plan on behalf of the city of Hutchinson. H is consideration for approval of FAA entitlement transfer per agreement with cities of Sauk Center and the city of Winsted. I is consideration for approval of out-of-state travel for Miles Seppel to attend the 2018 International Economic Development Council in Arlington, Virginia on June 18th, 2018. J is consideration for approval of lifting parking restrictions on Sherwood Street on June 5th, 2018 for Harmony River Block Party. K is consideration for approval of resolution number 14901, resolution calling for a public hearing on the adoption of updated criteria for granting of business subsidies. L is consideration for approval of items for City Alley number 17 improvement project, letting number 7, project number 18-07. Underneath there, we have resolution 14895, resolution declaring adequacy of petition and ordering preparations of report on improvements, and resolution number 14896, resolution receiving reports and calling hearing on improvements. And M is claims appropriation and contract payments, register A. Anything anybody wants pulled off?
I and L briefly,
I and L?
yes, please.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve the balance.
I will second that.
Motion by John, second by Chad to approve the balance. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Steve? Aye.
Just wanted to mention on the board action form at the end, it said to approve a resolution, and I had asked Miles about that, and that was a mistake.
Yeah, there's no resolution needed.
So
It's a typo.
just wanted to note that. But other than that, make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by John to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. L.
And just talked briefly with Kent, but, you know, when we had talked about the alleys before, it sounded like there's discussion about updating the policy, and so.
Yeah, just, I guess, in summary, what we want to do is get this project process started. Obviously, it's the end of May. It's creeped up on us. So we just want to order the hearing. We do have the 5th Tuesday in May here, so we're actually able to then deliver that hearing the next council meeting with that extra week in between and meet the publication dates. On the assessment policy front, John and I have talked a little bit, and I think we have an approach. We want to bring that to resource allocation in June at that meeting, the first week of June, and then we'll bring that to the council the same night we administer the public hearing. And all you're going to do that evening is authorize staff to prepare the plans and specifications and go out for bid, so we could still be crafting that policy, you know, as that project's out for bids. You know, we have been getting a little bit of feedback and questioning, I guess, from the property owner out there that's wondering when this project's going to be developed, or, you know, the process is going to start. So I just wanted to get it moving, and we have time along the way, you know, to craft that assessment policy, and I believe we have a good approach in mind that should work for everybody.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, second by Mary to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Approval of consent agenda 2, claims and appropriation contract payments, register B. I have a check on there to my business, so I'll be abstaining.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Motion by Chad, second by John. Any other discussion? I just wanted to mention that this was vandalism that happened at a restroom at Masonic West Park, I believe. So just
The Masonic or Rotary?
was a, yeah,
I thought it was Rotary.
it could have been.
I think it was.
I can't remember. The guys just come in and just said that there was damage at the restroom. So, I mean, it's kind of sad. We try to keep our city nice and neat and we have vandalism, but, so. Call for the motion?
Aye. All right.
We already did first and second.
Yeah. Yeah, I called for the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Got mixed up there.
Threw us off.
Yeah, oh well. Yeah. The ladies from Music in the Park update. We have a public hearing at 6, so we'll,
So, yeah, we've just been progressing with Music in the Park and...
oh, come on, you gotta introduce yourself,
Oh, okay.
remember?
Valerie Mockentune, 525 Lynn Road.
Yeah.
And Kayla Alexander, 1287 Denver Avenue. Okay.
Thank you.
So, we just kind of wanted to give you the little bit of the update. It's in the packet as far as what we're doing, and then mostly just share our new idea to have Main Street Sports Bar, 3 dates this summer, serve beer, wine, and a signature cocktail in the park during the concert for community members. So we just wanted to see if there were any questions about how that would be facilitated, be able to answer those at this time, because the first time would be June 11th, so that's fastly approaching.
I had one question, I guess, reading what was on the agenda and the plan, the themes. I mean,
Yeah.
There's no movie, it's the concert, and
Yep.
so it'll be over around,
So the first one for June 11th would be over at the normal time, about 8:30. Then we were looking at the River Song date of July 9th. So that one would include the movie, but same thing, Main Street Sports Bar would still only serve till about the movie time. So again, 8:30, along with the last event too. So we are thinking all drinks done being served by them about 8:30.
And you're doing wristbands or?
Yes. Yep.
So that,
So they'll card, they'll wristband, it'll be daylight still. You know, once it gets dark for the movie, we were gonna stop just because we don't have the power, the lights,
Right.
can't really monitor it, can't police it, and just wanted to try it out this year to see how it goes. Because our hope would be next year it'd be every night, in addition to then having food as well, so people would be able to eat, have a cocktail, have a drink, watch a movie, enjoy a concert. We have lots of new ideas for next year, but.
And the movie?
So we're doing Grease on July 9th, and we are doing Dirty Dancing for.
On August 6th.
Yep, so it'll be barbecue and watermelon will be the theme for the August.
River Song is kind of the theme for the 9th.
And then we'll have some fun Grease things.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's about it.
You've got somebody lined up to inflate the movie screen?
No, not yet.
We'll be soliciting that at a later date.
they're taking volunteers.
It's reserved, yeah.
And if I just might add one item with regard to the service of alcohol, the way that we have it set up through our city charter and ordinances right now, establishment that has an on-sale intoxicating license can provide alcohol at city-owned facilities, and we've had it in parks in the past, but the council has to authorize it. So if, as part of this process, if you undertake a motion to authorize Main Street Sports Bar to be able to serve alcohol at these events, that would be great. I noticed in the memorandum that they supplied, they talked about Main Street Sports Bar having insurance for the event. I'd like it to be clarified that it's important that Main Street Sports Bar have the city as a named insured on their own policy for these events. So if you could also include that in any action you might take, I'd really appreciate that.
So you would just be looking for the certificate of insurance to be made out to the city of Hutchinson?
Right, for these events.
Yeah.
They just have to be named on the insurance. Yeah.
It's not a,
Normal practice.
right.
Yeah, normal
Right.
certificate of
Right.
insurance that we do
Yeah.
all the time, yeah.
then along with that, if you would specifically authorize them to be able to serve alcohol at these events.
I would make that a motion,
I will-
exactly as Mark spelled it out.
What Mark said, right?
Yes, and I will second that.
we
Motion
need
by-
a time, or just leave it loose up until no later than 9 o'clock or something like
That
that?
would be great.
Yep. Yep.
Sure if
Good
they
to
wanted
have
to,
in that.
sure if they wanted to amend the motion to include
Sure.
that?
Until 9 o'clock. We'll amend that, friendly amendment, I believe it's called.
All right. And I'll second that friendly amendment.
All right, motion by John, second by Mary.
Just was curious with the chief. I see Chief Hatton's in the back. Are you okay with what's being talked about?
Oh, boy, I think we can manage. No, there won't be any worries.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
So again, it was June 11th, July 9th, and August 6th, okay. Have to put that on my calendar for the 9th and the 6th.
Ride your bike down?
Yep.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thanks, ladies.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We'll do number 12 under new business. Ordinance number 18783, ordinance revising chapter 90 of the Hutchinson City Code, right away, first reading, second reading and adoption.
Yeah, I can kick this off, and then we'll defer to Mr. Paulson and Mr. Sabora, but staff's been putting quite a bit of work into this effort, and it has gone to the Planning Commission now over the last 2 months a couple of times. This is the first reading this evening. We're obviously going to have a second reading, so I don't know how much time you want to spend on it this evening. Maybe John can touch on the process and some of the feedback we've received from some of the telecommunication providers, representatives, and then if you want to take a look at it between now and your next council meeting, we can go into greater detail then. So with that, John, go ahead.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. As Kent had indicated, we've had a couple Planning Commission meetings where these items have come forth. One of the items that it's interesting to note is that we've received multiple comments from the same party, even on the changes that we've made. So it's good that with the process is playing out the way that it is. The city posts language, we receive comments back, so on and so forth. So it's been very informative to also be able to see that, hey, we make changes and it's kind of a work in between relative to what the city wants and needs versus what stakeholders want and need within the ordinance as well. It's a good conversation to have, especially because of the fact this is really new to us. Small cell is such a unique thing. How it's regulated within the right-of-way, outside of the right-of-way with both the items that we're looking at tonight. It's really unique in that sense that it was really important for us to do that legwork on the front end to really engage in those conversations, get it out in front of the people that are interested in it and receive that feedback to make the changes that make sense. What I'll also do is touch base on the recent Planning Commission item. Originally, back in April, we had a public hearing for both of these ordinances. We received comment from Moss and Barnett originally, and then we received comments after that. Those comments were received formally. We had attendees at the April Planning Commission meeting, and then after that public hearing, we made some minor revisions to the ordinances based on some of those comments, and then we brought it back in May, last week at the Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday. Further comments were received based on the original comments that we had based on the original comments and changes that we had made. The further comments that we received were basically about the same items. It had been greatly narrowed down to basically about 4 items. Received additional comment at the Planning Commission meeting based on the chairperson's interest in allowing the stakeholder to speak that had provided those additional comments. And then ultimately in the end, based on the Planning Commission's favorable recommendation to bring it forward to council today. One thing that was worth noting too within the Planning Commission meeting minutes as well is there were primarily 4 items that we had talked about with the comments that we had received. Which item is it specifically? Is this the telecommunications or the small cell right-of-way one? This is right-of-way one, okay. And that's where most of the comments had been received on. One of the clarifying factors that we had was distinguishing that the right-of-way applies only to the right-of-way and small cell within the right-of-way. That was such an important distinction for all parties involved, not just from the city, but also for the stakeholders as well, that we clearly distinguish that the right-of-way language is different than the telecommunications and how we regulate small cell, but to clarify that that is indeed what the intent is that we're not going to apply the right-of-way standards for small cell to properties outside of the right-of-way, because they are different. And it was an important distinction to make. So I asked that question for that very reason, is that they are very similar, and small cell applies on private and within the right-of-way. But it was worth noting that we wanted to make sure that we kept them clearly different. Of the 4 items that we received at the Planning Commission, they were really quite simple. And I'll ask the mayor if he'd like Mr. Littlejohn to speak, but I can sum them up as well. Just had a chat with Jay in the lobby here too, but they're really simple to touch base on. One is regarding insurance, relative to the city potentially requiring that they submit an insurance policy within the ordinance language, and I believe it's 90.06, if I remember the chapter correctly. It specifies that the city may require insurance policies. We don't generally as a practice. Typically, we always receive certificates of insurance. That's not going to change. In the event that there's an incident or some sort of an issue, we could potentially require that we receive a copy of the actual insurance policy. It's very complex. I can let Mr. Littlejohn speak a little bit to that if you'd like. Item number 2 was specifically about items and restricting setbacks from other structures, poles within the right-of-way, from other structures, obstructions potentially that may be within the right-of-way, either light poles, utility pedestals, different things. That's in chapter 90.09. And really the thing that we clarified there is that those setback restrictions that the city can apply would only apply to other things within the right-of-way, not to items outside of the right-of-way. So if there's an item 5 feet out of the right-of-way that's a light pole, private light pole, we wouldn't have a setback requirement associated with that private light pole. We could only establish potentially setback requirements from other structures within the right-of-way. So since the city in the right-of-way ordinance only applies within the right-of-way, we wanted to make sure that we didn't apply that language within items that weren't within the right-of-way. Another item too is relative to use of co-location agreements and the language associated with here to, there to. That was a great catch based on comments that we ever received, and that was in 9009 as well. That was a simplification of just changing or adding a T to here tos to there tos. That was an easy change that was easily made, so the city took that upon ourselves to do that. And those were the 2 changes that we actually did make based on the comments received before at the Planning Commission meeting last week. And then the 4th item here, I have it written down. You bear with me just a second.
It was exciting reading.
What's that?
It was exciting reading.
Oh, I'm sure it was, yeah. We've been through it enough times that I still get fascinated in how we pulled all this stuff together is the way that we did. And then the other one is required zoning within residential districts. The language that's specified within the statute says that the city can require a conditional use permit in district zoned single-family residential. The interpretation based on staff, the reviews, comments that we've received, we've been through this, hashed through it a number of different times. Specifically, it says for zoning districts that allow single-family residential, well, we have more than one. So there is one specifically for single-family residential, and I believe other cities have done that where they've only restricted or required a CUP in single-family zone districts just for that R1. But we decided to incorporate all the R zoning districts that specifically call out single-family residential being allowed within them. And really, I believe that is a policy decision. Keep in mind that requiring a CUP doesn't restrict or deny the fact that there's an application within a zoning district like that. That it is only that the city may establish conditions within those districts. So in conversations, like I said, with the planning and zoning department, that it was a really consistent thing that we thought was appropriate, that if we don't feel conditions are needed, we don't have to put any on it. But in the event that it definitely is, and based on the additional comments that we received, there was further feedback from Moss and Barnett that they expressed interest that they would like to potentially see us to still soften that. So ultimately, I will, put that in front of you guys tonight to consider and think about that potentially before the second reading, or if you want to take different action. But with that, I think that kind of summarizes the 4 comments that we received at the last Planning Commission meeting. We made 2 minor revisions that you'll see in the packet tonight. Those, like I said, just a couple words. We removed in and around, or we moved around part out of it relative to things within the right-of-way, and then the other was we add, or we change here to there to in 2 instances in 1 chapter. So,
Are you done?
yeah, I'd be happy to. hand it over.
Mr. Littlejohn, this isn't a public hearing, but give you a couple minutes if you got something to tell us.
Mostly, my name is Jay Littlejohn. I'm an attorney with Moss and Barnett in Minneapolis. Mostly, I want to thank staff and the city for going through all the work to bring us to where we are today. There are just 4 issues, and I'm pretty sure that everybody has a letter that I provided, actually at the suggestion of the Planning Commission, that would be easier to focus on these issues if we just went through them. Mr. Paulson did cover everything that, all of our concerns. He gave a good summary, and I don't want to belabor the point. The language that we've suggested, for instance, to deal with the conditional use permits in residential zones, we recognize that there's an argument to be made. Many cities have decided that conditional use permits make sense for these facilities. Again, they're only in the right-of-way for these facilities when it's actually zoned R1 as opposed to all residential zones. We are asking that you reconsider having a conditional use permit for every residential parcel, whether it's multifamily residential zone or single-family residential zone. And I've suggested some language that would require a conditional use permit only when the lot that's adjacent to this particular installation is actually used for a single-family residential structure. So that's the one request that we have, recommendation that we have, rather than just say only R1, perhaps only R1 when there is an actual single-family home that's impacted by the proposed facility. The other suggestion that we had, actually it relates more to the application of the statute. The statute allows for the city to limit placement of these facilities based upon the existence of wireless structures, meaning poles and other things that are in the right-of-way, but not separation based upon wireless facilities. We envision a possibility where you may have someone else is using a light pole in relative close proximity, but it's not us. And we want to be able to ensure that we can still have that competition in network characteristics and signal quality that Congress envisioned when they granted these licenses, so you still have all of the price and service competition available. And that's why we've made that recommendation to limit those separation requirements only when you're talking about structures. Don't put another pole where there's already a pole available. That's the way I would put it in plain language. But if there happens to be a box up there with an antenna, that should not be a basis to limit the installations. And the rest of the topics were covered very well. And I can answer questions about anything. I've been representing this client and its predecessor since 1988. So if you have questions about the system, about the facilities, what they look like, I'm here to answer those too. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Littlejohn?
Just have to read.
Thanks.
And there is, I guess there is through Planning Commission, there's a red line copy too. I don't know if that's accessible. That was really helpful when we went through it the first time, but I think this, like you said, this summarizes the stuff at Planning Commission.
One thing that's important to note too, and I think that's a good segue as well, I think it's important to identify that the language that you're looking at before you tonight for the small cell ordinance, 70% of it's brand new. We had language existing relative to right-of-way, sidewalks, obstructions, sight lines. We had a lot of that language before, but ultimately, since the small cell language there was so much of it that was going to be new and incorporated. In addition to that, new right-of-way permitting process, the development of co-location agreements, all of those documents had to be newly prepared. So in essence, what the city staff did is we took our existing basically right-of-way ordinance language and paired that with the League of Minnesota Cities model right-of-way ordinance that included small cell language and kind of homogeneously merged them together. It wasn't easy to do that, and especially we had some conflicts and things, but that's in essence what you're looking at. We took what was a 7-page right-of-way ordinance and really built it out to be something that we utilize everything within the right-of-way permitting process, how all of that is structured. That's something we didn't have before, so we took it as an opportunity to address all of those things at once.
So you did Create the lead model.
Yep, that's the majority of what you're looking at.
See with other communities that you've looked at as far as the CUP and the zoning, residential scene?
Like I said, they all do it a little differently. Some of them are just more restrictive and like to be able to have the opportunity to or to require conditions within residential districts, and others specifically specified it to single-family residential. The league incorporates all of them, if I remember correctly. But the same thing there, they leave that open to a city's interpretation. So many of these things, as we work through it in the comments, there's you can, you cannot, there's some maze in there. I mean, there is some flexibility as far as what you can and can't do. But ultimately, the big thing in the comments that we were receiving is we wanted to make sure that we covered and caught all the things that either the city can't do, to make sure that language isn't in there. So that was a big thing that we were very sensitive to, is to ensure that it was compliant with the new statute that was adopted last year.
Anything else for John?
Obviously, in front of the council for consideration, it is simply a first reading. It's not an adoption. Obviously, we have a requirement that all ordinances have 2 hearings, and so if you do consider and approve of the first reading, the second hearing would be scheduled for our next regular council meeting, which is June 12th.
No, I need more time to look through it, but there's a lot there. Do that for the next meeting.
Since I'm on planning commission, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 18783, the first reading.
I'll second it. Motion by John, second by myself, to approve ordinance number 18-783. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. We have public hearing, 2018 pavement management program projects, letting number 4, project number 18-4. Under there, we have A is resolution number 14897, resolution ordering improvement and preparation of plans and specifications. And B is resolution number 14898, resolution approving plans and specifications and ordering advertisements for bids. Kent.
Good evening. Yeah, first and foremost, I'm going to have, John's going to pass out a handout we provided at our neighborhood meeting last Tuesday. Yeah, I know there are some familiar faces here, but I know for certain not everybody that's in the room was there to receive one of these. This was also included within your council packet. So with that, I'll just briefly overview the neighborhood meeting notice. Obviously, if you've been paying attention over the years, this looks familiar, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. And this was mailed to all the property owners adjacent to the project. This is our initial step when delivering a project as we begin to develop and interact with the adjacent. Remember that one of these things. Start to interact with adjacent property owners as we begin to develop a project and bring it to this stage, the public hearing in front of the city council. We touch on the streets being addressed within this document. We obviously invite them to the actual neighborhood meeting, and then we touch on the streets, why we're doing the improvement, how it's been identified. We touch on a little bit in broad terms on assessments. And the second page, we go on to describe the process involved. Neighborhood meeting, that's what we did last Tuesday on the 15th. I think we had about 15 property owners represented, properties. So
Out of how many approximately?
I think about probably 80-ish Yeah, just thinking back to the assessment roll, total on the four streets. The first official hearing is the public hearing. There's a separate notice that went out notifying all the property owners of this meeting, this hearing this evening. Looking forward, if we do proceed, there will be an assessment hearing in the future after the city receives bids and we develop the final assessment roll. Obviously, everything is subject to change, what roadways are addressed, assessment amounts if council desires. You know, we establish our assessment rates within our fee schedule that's adopted every year. We do deviate a little bit on the sanitary sewer and water services, and we actually wait to the actual construction bids to establish those. That's how we've approached that over the years, but we have provided an estimate at this point. And then last week we talked a little bit about schedule, construction items, and provide my name and number. Any questions on that? That was pretty quick. That's pretty typical for any project that involves assessments. We did have the neighborhood meeting the other night. Received some good input. We had a good conversation. I think what we learned is how we're trying to deliver this grouping of streets we might have to approach in a somewhat unique manner. Apologize for this out right now, but I should go into a little bit more detail how this grouping of streets has evolved, and some of you are familiar with the relatively late initiation of this project. You know, it is already at the end of May, and we did have another project that was being developed, involved the industrial roadway area, and that project has, at this point, we're under the impression that'll be delivered in 2019. So we have the opportunity now to deliver a pavement management program project. We did not deliver one last year, so this is a little bit of a blessing that we can get back into the pavement management program roadways. You know, we got the sizable project last year with school and Roberts, and the trail project, and then the roadway and utility project respectively. So what we did is we looked back up into the northeast quadrant of the community, and some roadways we put into a holding pattern, 5-6 years ago, when we spent quite a few years up there addressing Elm, 11th, 10th, a variety of them, College, Maple, another section of Spruce, you know, there was 6th and McLeod. There was a number of streets we addressed over a 4-year time frame up in that area. The two I want to note are 11th Avenue, this stretch of 11th between Elm and Maple, and then also Spruce Street between Northwoods on the north end and College on the south end. Basically a double block there. Those roadways we know needed fairly extensive reconstruction work, and most importantly, they needed water and sewer main work. And we knew that a number of years ago. We were obviously in a little bit situation financially at that point in time where we were trying to avoid large investments in our water distribution and sanitary sewer collection system due to where those funds were at, the reserve funds. You know, those were the early years of the sales tax. Even some of those roadways might have been prior to the implementation of the sales tax. So we wanted to avoid these roadways, or these two stretches specifically at that point in time, to not have that investment out of the water and sewer funds. Thus, we're coming back to pick those two up. Those two are the priorities in this grouping. And then we have Northwoods from Highway 15 to the east to Maple, 4 blocks. And then lastly, we have what popped up on our radar, and which I think might be not quite the right timing right now, and it's based on feedback we received the other night, and just the nature of the work involved is Waller here between Bluff and 6th Avenue. And why we identified this is we knew we had a sanitary sewer main out there that's very, very shallow. It's less than 4 feet in the one area, and then it remains very shallow, which presents some maintenance issues depending on the winter months, freezing and the lakes, obviously. So due to the fact that we had utility work involved on Spruce and 11th, we thought, well, maybe now's the time to address this. I think the more we've gotten into it and looked at it, it really doesn't necessitate a full reconstruction approach like Spruce and 11th will, and for that matter, Northwoods here doesn't have the utility needs, but it needs a full reconstruction. We can't get away with a reclaim approach where we grind up the roadway, do some curb and gutter repairs, and then grade it and pave it. Due to the subgrade soils being less than ideal, and just how that curb is performed and moved over the years, we know it needs to be addressed. The full road bed needs to be addressed. Just due to the movement there in the curb lines. Whereas Waller, the curb and gutter is actually performing pretty well. So I think there's an opportunity here, I think, to revise our scope, and I apologize because we had to scope this project rather quickly, like I alluded to earlier, and just get the process moving here. So I think we're at a point here now where we're probably going to do a base bid on 11th and Spruce will be our base bid, and then do an alternate bid on Northwoods. And depending on council's feedback, what I would recommend is we just put Waller off to the side, take a look at how we can approach that sanitary sewer main in the future. Maybe it's within the context of a reclaim project where that street gets grouped with other reclaimed streets. Granted, it might be somewhat of an outlier where we're addressing other reclaimed roadways in another part of the community. That's something we try to accomplish, is proximity to projects, to street segments. So, but we'll figure that out. And what I would recommend is, 11th and Spruce is our base bid. Northwoods is an alternate bid, and we wait on Waller.
Can you say that the water and sewer needs to be done based on?
Based on configuration with respect to the water main, we have some dual mains, we have some undersized mains that have been in the ground a long time and haven't been addressed over the years. And then we have, on the sewer side of things, we have some deflected pipes, significant sags in the pipes that require quite a bit of maintenance, jetting.
This is all the scoping that you've been doing.
Yeah, and like I said, we knew we had those issues 5, 6, 7 years ago when we're up in this quadrant of the community.
And then 11th to the west, has that already been done, or?
Yes, yep, that was done 6 years ago, I would guess.
So Kent, what's the age of those utilities that are there?
It varies. I guess the old, the very old, Spruce is, I think 60s, mid-60s. Yeah. Yeah, so that was, Spruce and 11th there. I think 11th's a little more recent, but you just, some pipes, some areas perform better than others over the course of time. It's due to the native soils. It's obvious. The other issue is just how things were constructed on any given roadway at any point in time. Maybe how much groundwater they were dealing with, how things were compacted around the pipes. So there's a lot of unknowns, and it might not show up right away, but over the course of time, some pipes will start moving and sagging and deflecting. The water mains are undersized, and we need to get those up to our standards.
So Waller would be later on, but that, you would actually be lowering that sanitary sewer line?
Yeah, we can lower that. We can
Okay.
actually take it to the north, take it back to Bluff, and tie it in there. So we'll redirect it to gain some depth. And we can gain about 3 feet of depth, which isn't a lot, but when you're talking short of 4 feet to begin with, it's a fair percentage.
Have they
increase.
actually had freeze-ups on that sewer line at that depth?
Yep, there's been issues over the years that John's dealt with.
Would that still require a full reconstruction?
No, that's what I'm alluding to. We grouped it with these roadways because there was utility work in Spruce and 11th, where it really doesn't need a full reconstruction like Spruce, 11th, and Northwoods. We could get away with a more cost-effective reclaim approach.
You're
We're-
still excavating
Yep,
significantly?
we're still addressing the sewer, which isn't the full length of Waller. That's the other issue. It's about 2/3 of that length. It's identified.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, we'll jump back to the handout that we sent around the room and provided at the neighborhood meeting. States a lot of things that are in the notice document. We provide the current estimated construction costs, project expenses. This is all 4 roadways, and they're relatively the same. Spruce, that longer section of Spruce is a little bit more than the others, but they're basically splitting that in quarters for the most part. Yeah, we look at the funding mechanisms. There's a significant amount of water, wastewater, infrastructure improvements, bonding, assessments, and this is really painting the picture why we want to start to pare this project down. As we developed the costs, figured out the assessments, and took a hard look at where the funds would come from. And the other big unknown at this point in time is Century Avenue. We still haven't gone out for bids on Century. So that's why we've been in this holding pattern. And the hope is we'll get a good number on Century. That has the $1 million of federal aid dollars funding that project. It has some assessment funds. If we get a good number, there might not be a whole lot of bonding funds involved in that project. So then, that frees up, our $1.9 million target that we were talking about earlier, conceivably a fair amount of bonding dollars to be utilized on this project. And then we talk about assessments. We get into a little more detail on the different type of roadway improvements and what typically the city pays for. And in general, our policy states a 50-50 premise between the city and the property owner, with the exclusion, like I noted earlier, being the water and sanitary sewer services. As you're all well aware of and we've talked about over the years, per city ordinance, the property owner owns their sewer service from their home all the way to the main within the roadway. So that's why we administer this assessment for the services. Granted, we will only be addressing from the main to the property line. We won't be going on to private property, the entire service. But like I said, we estimate $1,500 a piece for these residential service sizes. And yeah, I hope once we get the bids, due to the number of services involved, those costs, that actual assessment will be a little less. And then lastly, full street reconstruction, like I mentioned earlier, this will be a completely new section, 2-foot section, foot of select granular sand in essence, 8 inches of class 5 aggregate gravel, and then 4 inches of bituminous, our standard residential street section. We'll prorate it down. We've applied our rates or developed our rates based on a 40-foot basis. We'll prorate that down to 36 feet. Do the math on $80 a front foot, bring it down 90% of that gets you to $72. And then we apply, I just do a scenario, typical city lot, 66-foot width, with services, $1,500 a piece, like noted above. You arrive at just over $7,700. And then I'll always, I guess, our disclaimers, methods, and amounts of estimated assessments are subject to change. Those have been communicated to property owners. We did send out a notice last Thursday. Once we fully developed our worksheet, we had a couple tweaks to do after the the neighborhood meeting, so we got those out. So everybody was provided their estimated assessment amount. And then we note that the assessments are typically administered over a 10-year term, 4 to 6%. I think we've had that range on here for quite a long time. You know, we've been under that for some years, you know, even with the extra interest point put on the actual bond interest rate. But like Andy said earlier, we're probably looking at 3% plus 1, gets you to 4 conceivably this year. Any questions on that? With that, I think we pretty well covered it. Yeah, construction time frame, if everything goes as planned, you know, we're probably looking at construction beginning late July, early August, stretching into October.
You'll be able to get everything buttoned up and...
Weather cooperates. Yeah, it'll be tight, but downsizing the scope, if we end up only addressing Spruce and 11, obviously that helps our cause. And Northwoods, like I mentioned, doesn't have utilities in it, so that can be done later in the year, and you're not at as much risk to have deep trenches open and getting rain and not being able to dry out trenches in late September, October.
Anything else for Kent? Open it up for public comment. Just come forward and name and address, please.
Hi, I just had a couple questions. Being that is it typical?
Name and address, please.
Excuse me?
Name and address, please.
Todd Vetter, 725 Spruce Street.
Thank you.
Yeah. The question is it typical to wait this long to start a project to go out for bids?
I think as Kent mentioned, you know, there was another project that was kind of being worked on and anticipated, and we have had some other ones later on like this, but...
Yeah, we've been later, but yeah, I don't know if we've ever been this late initiating one. So, no, it's a legitimate question.
Okay.
Like I said, yeah, we had another project on the radar that it's been delayed.
Just the reason I ask is I would assume that most of these guys have their whole summer planned out, and will it either end up being more expensive for us than estimated because we have to go somewhere else, or will we get someone who's a lower quality contractor and we won't get the job we want because this is someone who couldn't fill their calendar for the year? And those are two biggest concerns I have.
They're pretty conscientious. I mean, generally, there's 3 or 4 contractors that bid all our jobs, and quite often it's a local contractor that gets it.
But that question
But that
did
is
come up
even
before when we were talking about this. Does it get late and...
Right. Yeah, we like to get things out earlier.
And I will say,
it's more favorable from a cost standpoint generally to bid your projects earlier, you know, in the spring, winter even. But, you know, we do set our assessments on a rate basis. So like a lot of communities do, they wait for the bids and then arrive at their assessments. And that can really hurt a property owner then, not having the project out to bids during a favorable time period.
So the number we got would be probably pretty close to that, or maximum? Or it's not gonna
I think in
fluctuate?
the last 10 years, we've deviated from that once and it went down, if I remember correctly, based on the bids.
and I will say, you know, part of the reason that we have a second hearing for assessments is if we feel like the bid is overpriced, we could very well postpone the project for that coming year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comment? Motion. Oh. No, that's not, this isn't. No. Any other?
Yeah.
Oh,
Chuck Hulsladen, I've got some property up on 635 Waller. I have a question regarding the assessment estimate. Looking at what he's talking about here, he's going to scale it way back, only doing the sewer and just a partial reclaim or whatever. From the estimates here, it still looks like a full, is this still correct?
Yeah.
Or is this not correct anymore?
Yeah, we're approaching Waller like the others. And that's typically how we group these projects. And it can get confusing if you're doing reclaim streets and full reconstructions within the same letting. So what we had originally proposed was addressing this as a full reconstruction, Waller, all of these streets. Like I mentioned earlier, unless council communicates otherwise, and like we talked the other night at the neighborhood meeting, I'm inclined to not move forward with Waller this year. And like I mentioned, we'll try to scope that project.
Would this estimate be correct with the scale
That
down?
estimate should go down in the
That's what I
future if
thought.
it's delivered as a reclaim project.
Okay, the other part of the question, that sewer was put in either incorrectly or was put in by the developer, whatever. You guys got it on your plate, correct? After the fact? You didn't put it in?
No, the developer put it in or a builder put it in, unfortunately, and
And we're still gonna be forced to have a fairly shallow sewer line because of the drop going to where you're going into?
Yep. Yep.
If you're gonna bring it down to where it needs to be, what would it cost to do it correctly so they don't have any more problems?
well, to bring it down to where it needs to be, you would have to introduce a lift station. You know, we can only go so deep via gravity, you know, and take it up to Bluff and make the connection there instead of it going to the south where it currently goes. But we can do, when we have it open, we can insulate it. So we can gain depth, and then we can put insulation board over the top of it before we backfill it.
You'd feel you'd be okay with that process?
Yeah, typically we start insulating at about 6 feet, maybe hair over 6 feet if we're starting to get that shallow with the sewer, which we don't see much. But yeah, that's proven to be effective.
If you do go through with it, when will we see that approximate estimate or whatever?
Honestly, I don't, and this was at least council, we talked a little bit about CIP earlier this evening. With the large projects identified in 2019, the Main Street project in 2020, you know, I don't think we'll be doing a pavement management program of any scope until 21, 22, honestly. So I don't think you'll see a project for another 4 or 5 years.
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other comments? Motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion by John, second by Chad to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Trails and parking improvement project.
Should we do that? You still have items,
Oh, I'm sorry.
resolutions 14897 and 14898.
Yeah. Motion to approve those resolutions.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 14897 and 14898.
I'll second that.
But do we want to include the Waller is included in that?
Do you-
Yeah, it might be good to include that in your motion. I'd appreciate that.
To
you're-
remove Walden?
Yeah, that you're not including Waller within the scope.
So you want me to amend that and say we're not?
Yeah, I would just make that exception. Yeah, please.
Okay. Friendly amendment then.
And I
Not
will
to
amend my
include
second.
Motion by Mary, second by Chad to approve those resolutions. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay. Now trails and parking improvement project, letting number 10, project number 18-10. Under there, we have resolution number 14899, resolution ordering improvement and preparation of plans and specifications, and resolution number 14900, resolution approving plans and specifications and ordering advertisements for bids. Kent,
Yes,
again?
thank you. We talked about this project a little bit at the council, I believe, when we ordered the public hearing a couple of meetings ago. Really, what we have in front of us is what we're framing up as a trail and parking improvement project. Two areas, the Elks Park area that we talked about many months ago when representatives of that group was in front of council, and we talked about the playground improvements that are being developed, installed there, the need for parking in the area, specifically handicap parking immediately adjacent to the park. And then also with our Century Avenue Trail, hopefully coming this summer, we can make a connection to that and then bring it down to Orchard, which is this street right on the edge of the page, and that'll connect into the existing trail system and get you down to Denver. And that trail that heads towards the new apartments and the lakes. Other than that, we are able to squeeze a trail into the right-of-way. There's a lot of detail on here that I won't get into. This was our kind of our concept plan, trying to identify everything that we had to deal with along the way here. We do arrive at, I believe it's four handicap stalls and 5 typical parking stalls. And then we loop our trail around that, and then we get up to the center there and make that connection. Yeah, I should have mentioned, there's a handout in front of you. That'd be easier maybe if you want to take a look at things.
So how many, sorry, with the cross hatching?
Yep.
Those are all the handicapped ones.
Yeah, these are the handicap right here. These are the loading zones.
Okay.
Associated the cross hatching with the handicap stalls. Yeah, and I'm surprised this actually fit as well as it did, and we didn't have more headaches, but we got a few utility pedestals and things like that they're going to have to be relocated. But our utility providers are pretty good at accommodating us if we give them ample notice. Any other questions on this one? I'll get into costs as a whole here between the two improvements in the end. Standard trail, we are immediately adjacent to the curb here for a portion of it. You know, that's not our typical design on a new roadway, but you know, where this is a retrofit basically.
How deep are the parking stalls?
These are diagonal, so they're a little less than the typical 20. I want to say they're maybe 18 and a half between the face of curb and the valley gutter. That's on the back end of them.
And the one big pine tree is going away, right, on the corner?
Yes.
Property
We are digging into
owner
that
asked me
tree.
about that.
Yep, and we've had a conversation, that property owner, staff has. All right, if there isn't anything else, I'll jump to the next one, which is the next page in your handout. Yeah, we'll do this first, because we've talked a little bit about this. It's really a blow-up of the area immediately adjacent to the bridge, the 5th Avenue Southeast Bridge. You can just see the edge of the bridge there, the approach panel and the lakes. So we'd connect under the bridge to the existing trail. We'd actually go all the way under the bridge. The portion directly beneath the bridge that was paved some years ago has been eroded, and there's some issues there. So we'll chase that back to the north side of the bridge, make that connection. And then we're showing our trail alignment, but what we really want to display here is a 6-foot sidewalk, which would be the connection up to 5th Avenue. And yeah, this isn't, we like to design sidewalks or connections, but this is what is necessary to achieve ADA grades.
Right. And this is, just to clarify for the audience, if anybody's interested, this is by the charter school on 5th Avenue by the river. So.
Yep, exactly. So 5th Avenue Bridge would come underneath, 6-foot sidewalk tying into the trail facility. We have to loop it, do a switchback. There's about 13, 14 feet of grade we have to chase up this slope. We get that up to the sidewalk facility, the gray here on the south side of 5th Avenue. If you look at the profile sheet, you know, you're into the detail here. This dash line is the existing lay of the land along that alignment, and then this is our straight line sidewalk grade that we're able to arrive at. And I'm surprised we got it to 5%, honestly, and this is what it takes to get it to 5%, which is the
20,
American
20.
Disabilities Act longitudinal grade maximum. Any questions on that? If not, we'll take a look at the full alignment and some of the costs involved. Next page in your handout. Yeah, like I said, we're tying into the existing trail just north of the bridge. We'll bring it under the bridge. Here's the sidewalk, obviously. And then here's the next, well, I guess the south end of the trail that would tie into Ranch near the Dakota Rail corridor. The color coding, unless there's any questions, I'll just jump to costs and why these things are different colors.
Coating's just all the phase, or the different parts.
Yeah, it ties into the three colors on the right side of the estimate here. And like I alluded to, you have the south end of the trail, which is the blue. That arrives at just over $51,000 construction. The north end of the trail is the pink, purplish color, I guess, on the drawing. Just short of $20,000. And then the sidewalk, the gray, up the slope there, is just short of $25,000. The green here was what we looked at along Sherwood by Elks Park. This includes the parking lot and the trail. It's just over 100,000, 104,000 we estimate. The grand total of all the columns comes to just a hair over $200,000. So that's the project we scoped. I know we've had some conversations about the Fifth Avenue segment. I did include a letter we received from New Discoveries, the school that John alluded to earlier, their executive director, Mr. Conrad, for your information. And at this point, we're really looking for council's input on what you would like to see pursued. In my mind, we can do something similar to what we just discussed with respect to the pavement management program, where you could do an alternate bid approach. We could make Sherwood our base bid. We could bid this improvement. The one, I guess, concern I would have is I really broke out the costs just for information purposes. I wouldn't want to see, us just build this, obviously the purple. I mean, you can't build the gray with at least the purple. And, ideally, in my mind, I don't think you'd want to build any trail work without the blue to have an ultimate connection. This would be, from a trail user standpoint, would be a dead end. And then you're tied to a sidewalk where if you're a bicyclist, you're not supposed to be using that sidewalk, so that introduces some issues. And, granted, I don't think that's being actively enforced, but per the letter of our ordinance, we do have some language with respect to sidewalks and the users allowed on them. So,
Dead end before.
yeah, and you're exactly right, Steve. It dead ends under the bridge today. Yeah, it just goes slightly past. Yeah, you can just see it off the edge of it does dead end, basically right here under the bridge. And yeah, here's the connection. Yeah, the T that goes to 2nd Avenue.
What do you estimate is the crossing, the light signal?
Yes. We received a recent quote for 2nd Avenue and Grove Street. And we're looking to pursue that next year, or this summer. $12,000, and we think this installation will be about the same due to the length of the boring across the roadway. That can be a big driver in that cost. It's how much pipe needs to be bored under the road to make the connection between the two lighted signs. So yeah, 12,000. We don't think there's going to be a need for significant concrete work or pedestrian curb ramp. improvements.
Have we been receiving any feedback on the school road crossing? Like if people have been enjoying it or?
Yeah, I've heard some good things. I've seen some people use it. Yeah, I think they serve a purpose. And this is a similar situation where you have some speeds involved. You know, obviously there's some speeds. I think we've improved the speed dynamics on School Road with the narrowing of the roadway a little bit, what I've seen over recent months, but there's still some speeds there. There's still obviously some young drivers over in that School Road corridor, you know, due to the location. Fifth Avenue, you know, you have speeds. You have obviously freight, and you have more freight in this area due to the proximity of 3M and some other industrial users that utilize this corridor. The co-op, the elevator, and even the scrapyard, and then you tie in ultimately to Energy Park, the industrial park, and McLeod Hazardous Waste, so. Yeah, and then sight lines, there's a little bit of a elevation, vertical elevation sight line, you know, if you're eastbound and coming over the bridge, you know, you are kind of looking up over the bridge there, so your sight line gets compromised a little bit. It's not significant. You're not completely blinded of that crossing, but yeah.
Still some of it though, depending on the school hours, could have sun rising.
Yep.
As people are traveling east, so you have that dynamic. I guess as I've thought about it more, I walked under and looked at everything too, and you know, it is kind of a safe route to school issue, and you know, New Discovery is going to be implementing this walk bike fun program, you know, with their students, and so hopefully, you know, we'll encourage more biking. If it was my recommendation, I'd say do the purple and the gray. And because with the blue, as we were talking about it before, you know, that's almost part of the grant application for possibly a legacy grant with the Dakota. I know it's not necessarily a part of the project right now, but, you know, especially if there's a joint powers or some other agreement, maybe that could get wrapped in, and that's a local contribution as part of the project. And so, but we don't know how long that'll be yet, right?
Exactly.
And so, but here, you know, the purple and the gray, there is an immediate benefit to that. And I think the sidewalk works well because most of the traffic's going to be one way anyway. They're going to be coming to school or they're going to be going home from school. Or I don't see a whole lot of, just based on the, and there's no residences really around that area, so you might come up onto Fifth and then go down back into town, you know, like what people do nowadays. So.
And there's the very few residents, obviously, to the south.
There's a couple there, yeah.
Ranch area, but not too many. Yeah, I'm just more approaching from a connectivity standpoint. I completely understand your point of view, Steve. But I'm a fan of ending things where they tie into something, you know, just purely from a connectivity standpoint. We could certainly approach the project with the gray and the purple. We could, I wouldn't want to necessarily do an alternate bid just for that blue portion. We could, but it gets, I don't know, a little bit unnecessary. Starts to irritate contractors, I guess, when you start to do that sort of thing sometime, when you're talking about only doing an alternate bid on, you know, $40,000 worth of work.
Kent, is there a way that you could angle that where you connect the gray and the purple together? Could you turn that more to the north or not?
No, we looked at this every way we could to make these grades work. And yeah, I think that profile really paints the picture like I showed earlier. you know, where you have that
Yeah.
up, that up
Yeah.
and down, and what we're trying to transverse there, and
Why not just take it right up to Ranch Avenue instead of back up? Why loop back to Fifth Avenue?
we still have to make grade up here. You're still dealing with.
Oh, you're
this
talking
thing.
about,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. There's still a little bit of a hill there.
Yeah, you need that distance. And I guess the other thing is, you can't, see this, there's kind of a hole here. I know it's tough to see, you gotta be standing out there to understand the lay of the land there. But there's significant grade here just on this stretch. Yeah, trust me, we looked at that, you know, could you just get
Yeah.
it there, build a sidewalk up along Ranch?
There's quite the slope there,
Yeah.
going up there off Ranch.
And that's why we took it to a sidewalk also. That actually benefited us. Instead of having a 10-foot wide trail, we were able to take it to a 6-foot sidewalk. Then you're not building this larger bench as you're chasing up the hill and making your grades work and what you're doing cut and fill wise.
I think I'd go along with Steve with this purple and the gray.
As an alternative bid, with Sherwood being the main bid.
Correct.
You want to do that or just bid it as a whole? I mean,
Okay, both make it part of the project.
yeah, I would stress that because if you look at the numbers,
Not a huge
Sherwood's pretty close to $100,000 and does the bid limits come into play?
70.
Is it August 1st?
75 August 1st.
First, right, August 1st, yeah. So, we're almost bumping up against that at this point. But I would think, you want to bid something with some magnitude, especially if we're going to go through the public bid process. I would hate for us to do an alternate bid. We get our base bid for Sherwood's less than $100,000. Then that's kind of almost wasted effort from staff's standpoint.
But anybody, it's public hearing, right? So-
Yeah. Open it up for public comment.
motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by John, second by Mary to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. So we have resolution number 14899 and resolution number 14900.
Same Mayor and Council, the resolutions include can't present it, so if you're looking to do something different, we have to make sure you note that in your motion.
Yeah, I gotta look to make sure I word this right.
All you have to do is say everything but the blue.
Would that be sufficient?
Sherwood and,
This- Everything, blue section from
Segment 430 LF, or, yeah, the 430.
up to Ranch Avenue.
Sherwood Street Trail and parking and Fifth Avenue Trail North, segment number 160 LF and Fifth Avenue 6-foot concrete walk, correct?
Sir.
Or do we want staff to go out there and actually paint those lines so that we can just,
Yeah.
We could.
That's my motion.
Second.
Go ahead.
Motion by Steve, second by John. Any other comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kent. Ordinance number 18-784, ordinance revising chapter 154.119 of the Hutchinson City Code, telecommunications. First reading, set second reading and adoption.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor,
Here.
once again. As discussed prior as part of the right-of-way ordinance topic, this one was much less commented on. Once we were able to clarify that this only applied it on properties outside of the right-of-way, that really kind of calmed some nerves. We received very few comments. The ones that we received were really more just typos, grammatical type of things. Otherwise, the telecommunications ordinance is different than the right-of-way ordinance in the sense that the telecommunication ordinance is already on the books. We just made some revisions to it to accommodate small cell applications outside of the right-of-way. That was the primary things we looked at, and most of the comments that we received didn't even apply to those types of things. It was just more of a clarification on, does this apply to small cell or not? So it was more kind of a idea exchange and conversation than it was more so of actual changes to the proposed language that we had. So with that in mind, like I said, it's just a lot simpler process. It was easier for the users and the stakeholders to not have any conflicts associated with it, just because there were much fewer changes, especially relative to the statute language that was adopted last year. The telecommunications ordinance didn't necessarily have to be changed, but we found it as be appropriate to do so, just to clarify that since we're doing so much in the right-of-way relative to small cell and the requirements associated with that, that we actually have some consistency with the changes in the language that we use within the telecommunications ordinance as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And likewise too, Planning Commission meeting, there wasn't a lot of comments received relative to this one as well.
And Mr. Littlejohn has left also, so you can
Right.
see that there's not too much of a concern.
So is there, I mean, again, I was gone all weekend, got back last night, so that's one area I haven't been able to look at these two ordinances because they're pretty lengthy and detailed, but we get some fees, you know, whether it's franchise fees with cable, obviously city, we own that, but is there any opportunities, you know, with antennas on our water tower, for example? We have lease arrangements with those. Is there any provision within the telecommunications and small cell for those to continue, or?
Right.
Okay.
Good question. Currently, we have macro sites on our water towers so that multiple carriers are participating in where we have lease agreements. The statutory language that was adopted by the legislature last year does not apply in those instances. They had thresholds specific to co-location on city light poles as an example. For within the right-of-way, it's capped at $150 per pole per year. So we can't charge more than that.
Okay.
Whereas outside of the right-of-way, if it's on a city facility, if it's on this building or at a water tower, we can charge market rate. So currently that's based on 6 antennas on a macro site. We would have to revisit that if someone proposed, hey, we would like to put one of those on a city, at a city park facility, because we can charge more than $150. There's no limitations associated with
Outside the right-of-way.
correct, outside of the right-of-way. So we'd have more ability to potentially charge more in those types of applications. Like I said, not sure what that number would be. We haven't actively marketed for macro sites or small cell sites on city property in my 10 years. I don't know if that's something we should potentially look at doing. I don't know how we would possibly do that, but something worth considering. I'm sure there's a way to pick up the phone and start calling multiple carriers and say, hey, we're open for business. But if they have access to right-of-way at $150 per pole, I don't know why they'd want to pay us $1,000 per pole 15 feet from there. So, I mean, from a practicality standpoint, I don't anticipate us having that, but it could very well happen in areas where there's lots of state highway right-of-way and there's a city park right there and no other good locations. Keep in mind, the right-of-way ordinance language does not apply to state and county right-of-ways. It only applies to city right-of-ways. So there's a distinction there, but there's the potential that's there as well.
The reality is these sites are all going to end up like by Highfield Apartments and stuff. That's the way it is in Mankato. It was last year, I think I was down there for a meeting and took photos and they were all around Mankato State, around these really dense apartment buildings with all of the people that have non-flip phones, unlike me.
Other high concentrated areas too, where you have events, if it's arenas, if it's big park facilities, those are other key locations that they tend to look at. Malls are big commercial districts as well.
Mayor and Council, once again, this is what's in front of you tonight for consideration is a first reading. of the ordinance, not on adoption. Adoption would take place after a second reading per our city code.
So I would make a motion to approve ordinance number 18784, first reading.
I will second that.
Motion by John, second by Chad to approve. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Ordinance number 18-787, ordinance amending section 30.18, regular meeting order of business to remove the invocation and add moment of silence. First reading, set second reading, and adoption.
Mayor and council, in front of you tonight is an ordinance for consideration, and it was brought forth by Councilmember Cook. I'll maybe hand it over to him to explain.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to make it clear that I was the one that asked that this be put on. And I did it in part after the council received the letter from the Ministerial Association saying that they would not be able to seek ministers of other faiths to give the invocation occasionally. So I respect that. And but at the same time, you know, I had made the motion and voted in favor of keeping the invocation at our April 10th meeting to give the Ministerial Association a chance to follow through on the public pronouncement that was made at that meeting, expressing a willingness to try to do that. And I understand, you know, that was done outside of the organization. And so again, I respect that and appreciate that. Similar to this evening, you know, I brought up the topic at the end of our March 27th meeting about my concerns about the invocation and the conflicts that I have with that from the separation of church and state aspect of it. And that's why I asked to put it on the April 10th agenda. So we did that. I expressed those concerns again. And also that I believe that it's important to remember that we represent everybody in the community, and not everybody, you know, believes in the Christian faith. There's other faiths that people practice and believe in. There's others that maybe consider themselves spiritual and not religious. And then there's others that have, you know, totally different beliefs, maybe not any religious beliefs whatsoever or spiritual. But we represent everybody. And I think the council is even representative that way of some of that diversity. So while I, you know, again, I respect the Ministerial Association's position, their willingness to volunteer their time, but I do believe it's problematic when only Christian pastors and ministers are being invited, you know, to give the invocation. And I know in the letter it said, you know, maybe, you know, the city can appoint or look for a couple people, but, you know, that also it's another level of discussion, because is it 2 times, is it 12 times, you know, whatever. So it becomes problematic in its own right as well. And so in tonight's packet, I included, you know, a memo of why I thought that this was important to do. And I think it's also important that everybody remembers that the invocation is aimed at the council by themselves. It's not for the audience. It's not for the people watching at home. But they obviously get included because they might be watching or they might be present here. My personal preference is still to do away with the invocation. and focus on the Pledge of Allegiance because that has a civic foundation to it, still recognizes God. But I understand that some may still want the opportunity to say a prayer at the start of the meeting. So in recognition of that, I thought of proposing the idea of replacing the invocation with the moment of silence. And I actually had that ready for our meeting on April 10th, but just I declined not to present it at that time just based on the discussion that was going on at the time. But I believe the moment of silence respects all the various interests by providing a scheduled time for each council member to give them the opportunity to say a personal prayer if they wish. And that's no different than the example that was given at our April 10th meeting of an athlete who takes a personal moment before they step onto the mat or into the batter's box to take a personal moment to say something personal for them before they start. The moment of silence also respects those of other faiths and beliefs by not imposing or seeming like we're encouraging one faith or the other. And it addresses the scheduling problem because it's scheduled as part of the agenda and moment of silence. So again, this is all about respect. I respect the Ministerial Association, and I don't want to ask them to do something that they're not comfortable with, and that's fine. It also respects staff time. It respects the council members and others who might want to say a prayer at the beginning of the meeting. It respects others with different beliefs, and it also respects the principle of separation of church and state. That's it.
Anybody else?
I guess I agree with Steve. I would be the non-Christian member of the city council. I actually take my inspiration when I say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I always think about the last 6 words of the Pledge of Allegiance that says, "With liberty and justice for all."
Mary?
I guess I'm in favor of saying the prayer. I feel good when I do that. And I know that we all have differences in our religion and in our faiths, and it is a personal thing, but I lean towards keeping the prayer.
From most of the feedback I've gotten, I think it's the desire of the community to leave it the way it is.
And I agree with that.
I had a bunch of calls today, and I know last time it was brought up, I didn't have anybody say that they were mad that we kept it. They were happy.
So what's a bunch of calls? I hear that, you know, and I know like Mary made the same comment the last meeting.
I tell you, usually when I go and I have a post office box, and I have a lot of people stop me when I go to the post office. I've had calls at my business. I've had calls, you know, at home. So, I mean, if you want me to keep track, I can, but, I mean, it seems like the majority of the people, and that's who we represent, so.
But do we represent only those who call us or come to a meeting?
No. No, we don't. We represent everybody. So, right now, I will open it up for public comment, but
I just had, just before that happens, so I just, to the rest of the council members, do you consider the way it's set up right now legal? Having the Ecumenical Ministerial Association in charge of the invocation, even though they're not willing to let anybody else participate in their organization?
John, I read the letter too. I don't think they said that they weren't willing to, they turned it back on to you two to find correct. Was that-
Correct.
To the city.
But, okay, the invocation is part of law. It's part of the ordinance, it's a part of the official city council business. The agreement with the ministerial association is informal, it's not in statute, it's not in law. It's a wink and a nod from some point in the past that we're not sure of. Matt pointed out in his letter that it dates to 1966 possibly.
That's when the invocation started.
Yeah, that's when the invocation started, and when the Ecumenical Ministerial Association was put in charge of scheduling the invocation, we're not sure when that happened. But at a minimum, if it's legal, it should be in the ordinance. And if it's in the ordinance, there should be city council oversight on it. We have oversight on planning commission, police commission. At the end of our packet, we've got oversight on the financial reports. I believe we've got a planning commission one on it. I think if it's going to continue, then whoever's in charge of it, there has to be city oversight. The members who schedule it would have to be appointed by the city council. Otherwise, I really think it's illegal.
Can I just address a couple of things regarding procedural wise? And John, you're correct. At one time or another, staff was asked to reach out to the Ministerial Association to fill the schedule. At the end of the day, ultimately, it's the council's authority to determine that. So if there's a desire to no longer ask the Ministerial Association to do that, you guys would have every right to do that. Essentially, we've asked as a city, like I said, once again, probably before everyone's time here, we've asked them to provide us with the list of who's going to do that. And to add to that, there's never, at least in my term of being here and talking with staff that's been here longer than me, we never turned away anybody from wanting to come and deliver a prayer of any faith or background. We've just not had a request from somebody to come and give one.
They haven't invited anybody.
So, and whether the council has invited anybody, I do not know that. So, but that's the background to it.
And so best practices is that, and you, the League of Minnesota City memo and the memo that you sent to us shows that the city at least goes to the phone book and attempts to contact people that are listed in the phone book. And that may be a moot point nowadays because how many people are on the phone? You know, everybody has cell phones and stuff.
At least a flip phone.
Yeah. We have a flip phone, and my cell phone, and that number is on the city website. But then, I mean, and then I think the other letter that we got, I don't know if people read it or not, from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They spelled out best practices of the city in New Jersey where city staff actually was scheduling it and going out and contacting members of multiple different faiths and scheduling them. So, you know, my feeling, that's best practices. If it was going to continue, that's the way it should be done. I think the way it's set up right now, our grade is at best a D-. If at all it passes the legal test.
That's your feeling, and we can respect your feelings, but you have to respect ours too.
But I also would hope that you had read the letter from the...
Yes, I did.
And the guidance from the League of Minnesota Cities. And do you think we meet the test from the League of Minnesota Cities in your reading?
I'm pretty sure that our city attorney would point out that if we were doing something illegal.
Well, there's where Mark can weigh in.
Sure. Regardless of those two sources that you talk about, you know, this whole thing really stems from that United States Supreme Court case, that Town of Greece case. I can't remember what state it was in.
Yeah.
All that case really did was affirm the way that city did it. They didn't say that's how it had to be done.
Mm-hmm.
They just noted that the city clerk in that town went through the phone directory and contacted the leaders of various congregations in that city. that decision doesn't say that's the only way it has to be done,
No.
but they do talk about that's the way that it was done in that community, and the Supreme Court was comfortable with that manner of doing it.
So,
Included reaching out, or attempting to reach
reach
out
out.
to other.
doesn't,
Well, again, the way that I read that case is they made a very strong point of saying contacting faith leaders in that community. I think they explicitly say there is no requirement to go outside of the city limits to try to attract other faiths to give the invocation.
so what you're
But
saying.
basically, to your point, I mean, that's the way they did it in that case. Matt kind of alluded to the fact that, hey, over time, this is how the city of Hutchinson has done it, whether there was a formal agreement, arrangement that the ministerial association would supply the people to give the invocation. That predates my time here. So really, it's up to you how you feel it should be done. If you're going to direct the city staff to contact the ministers of the city, I'm sure that's something that we'd be willing to do.
But, to my point about the invocation is by ordinance, and the scheduling point of it, if it's going to be legal, do we have to legally say that the Ecumenical Ministerial Association is in charge of it? How do we work through that?
I would say based off of what we have on file, we adopted a bylaws a year ago, and all it simply says is that there's going to be an invocation. I would recommend that that the council should, if it's our desire to maintain and keep invocation, we should have a formal policy in place at state, because right now it's informal. We don't have anything written down. So,
How would the council feel if we took it out of the ministerial association's hands and had like an application window of, say, 10 days in the fall for the next year? And whoever wanted to say a prayer could put in an application and then select at random, I guess, 12.
well, there's going to be, we have at least 24 city council meetings.
Well, because we usually do it per month now.
Yeah.
Or whatever the breakdown is, it's just, but we just pick 12 of the people or 24 of the people or whatever, and if we don't have enough spots or people apply to fill the schedule, then we just won't have one.
I shared with, I think, Council Member Cook, if he said, once again, this is where we need to draw it back, that at the end of the day, the council makes the decision on who comes and gives you the prayer, because the invocation's meant for the city council.
Right.
So however you instruct staff to go about doing that, if you say, that's I guess the direction we're going to have to look forward to in the future, because what's been said now is reach out to the ministerial association to provide us with a list of people that are going to give that prayer. Now, when did that start and who decided that was before all of us here on the
And that's
council.
what when I've said that it's very problematic. I think this exactly shows what's problematic about the way it's set up right now.
Well, it's been working since 1966, so.
Yeah, but, lots of things have changed since 1966, Gary.
Right.
Mark,
That doesn't mean it's correct.
Mark,
Steve,
if I understood
can
you
you
right,
let me run the meeting, please?
Okay.
This is the discussion, Gary.
Mary?
I was addressing this to Mark. If you reiterate what you just said, you're saying that it should stay within the community. That's what this other city did.
Right,
Right.
that's what that Supreme Court case
They went
talks
through their
about.
phone book and went, this,
Right.
this, and this,
And,
and they reached out.
A way that I look at it is, the way that case was decided, the community was more or less, this probably sounds bad, but was more or less forced to play the cards that they were dealt. They happened to be in a predominantly Christian community. That was the pool of religious leaders they had to pick from.
Right.
So the Supreme Court said that was fine. You weren't obligated in any manner of having to go outside of your city limits to try to promote religious diversity. Not that you couldn't do that, but the
Right.
Supreme Court said you didn't have to do that.
So that kind of defines our community, doesn't it?
Yes.
Is it?
Well, does it?
And will it always? So,
On the scenario I described, it puts the, the burden on people that want to actually come out and participate. And that's what I like about that suggestion. And then it eliminates any of the controversy surrounding somebody getting locked out.
Except your comment, Matt, is, staff comfortable with making those choices, or?
Well, this is, and I'll throw out what would likely happen. Every year, we set a calendar for meetings. We would, probably in the fall, Melissa and I would see a combination of, we've got in our newspaper, there's a list of churches that represent the community. They'd be contacted. There would be a letter sent to all the churches in the community, and then there would be an advertisement in the paper for those that are not listed in either one of those functions, getting back to all the different modes to which they would essentially apply. And then we bring it in front of the council for approval, probably December, like we do all our other calendars for the preceding year. So, if you're asking me right here on the spot, that's how the process would be done.
I prefer that because, as I pointed out last time, I served on planning commission with Fareed Karumboy or whatever. And and I had been at conferences and stuff where Fareed went to his morning prayers and stuff like that. And that way, it would allow people that, because I don't believe there's a mosque currently in Hutchinson. I know the mosque used to be at Hutchinson Technology. That's where they used to pray. That would give them the opportunity to be included in it without having to go through a Christian organization.
Anything else before I open it up? Great, I'll open it up for public comment. I'll ask you to keep it to 2 minutes or less. Just come forward and state your name and address, please. Go ahead, Steve.
Pastor Steve Alcott at Christ the King Lutheran Church, 1047. No, I don't. 1047 Great Roads, where the church I serve, but Rolling Oaks Lane. I come not only representing my church, but also HEMA. And actually, this is going to sound crazy, but the reason why we wrote the letter that we did is because what the government asked the church to do was to go and do something on their behalf, which is precisely why separation of church and state was put into place. People aren't aware of the history of this, that it was not to protect the state from the big bad church. But in reality, the history shows that it was first set up to protect the church from the state making mandates of it. That's why we sent the letter back, and we tried to graciously say, how about having 2 spots open so that non-believers or whoever else want to come and do that? I mean, we really were trying to be fair while also protecting you from doing something that is unconstitutional and demanding us to do something. So I'm surprised that no one's thought of that, but I wanted to share that. We pray for all of you, and that'll continue. It's continued long before any of you were here, before I was here. That'll continue. And I'm sad that we keep doing this month after month, finding new ways to keep this going, when the Supreme Court, I'm very nervous, has ruled on this pretty clearly, that there's nothing unconstitutional happening here. And Hutch has spoke pretty clearly of its desires. And I, too, share the concern of the 5% or the 2% or the 20% or the whatever percent, which is why we wanted to make it available for, I mean, if it's on us, we've said, why don't we have 2 spots that you guys can do whatever you want to do with it. But that was the concern. So I guess I'm just saddened that we continue to do this. And out of respect for everyone and their beliefs, whatever you decide to do, we support you and we pray for you, but I'm hoping that we can put this to bed tonight and that we can keep on doing on.
Thank you, Steve.
So God's peace to you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. Morgan Baum, 925 2nd Avenue Southwest. I'm here to support replacing the invocation with a moment of silence. I believe, and you heard tonight from a pastor and a faith leader, that a moment of silence is the best of both worlds. Those who want to pray can do so. Those who don't can abstain. Those who want to take a moment to reflect on why we're all here can also do that, which is to improve the quality of life for all of our residents. All of our residents, like many of you have said tonight. I believe you guys want to create a community that's open and inclusive to everybody, including people like John, including people like me, including people who are not Christian faith. But continuing to have a Christian-only invocation and not a moment of silence is truly not inclusive. I'm sure you've heard loud opposition, which I don't know how many phone calls it was, but I made a few. And I remind you that there have been many times in our history where those protesting loudest do not represent everyone. And I ask you to advance this tonight to a second reading, and I'm sorry, but not to end it here, to go and discuss this again in 2 weeks, and ultimately adopt it. Because sometimes you have to take a moment of silence to hear those who are not shouting. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, Tim Van den Langenberg, pastor of Hope Family Church, and I would simply submit that a moment of silence is not necessarily the best respectful thing to do, because it silences those who would speak. It silences the greater part of our citizenry that expresses a Christian foundation of their faith and would like to have their spiritual leaders pray for you publicly and have it read into the record and have it be part of your meetings. So to say silence is not respectful, it actually is disrespectful to a great part of our heritage.
Please refrain from clapping or cheering. Please.
Sandy Juffer, 20975 Bell Lake Road. As a grandmother and a mother, I am concerned about the direction our nation is headed. In the beginning of our meeting, we said, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Then I wonder after that why some of you do not want to allow a prayer to our Father God and ask Him to bless your meeting. Must you take God out of everything? The public school let God go, and look what's happening there. And our nation is turned its back on God, and look what's happening in our nation. I fear for my grandchildren. God honors and favors those who honor and favor Him. Our nation was founded on Christian principles. I have a quote that I want to close with from Karl Marx. Karl Marx said, "Take away the heritage of a people, and they're easily destroyed." Thank you.
I'll take one more comment.
Dave Sebesta, 225 Dale Street, Southwest. I applaud the one, I respect the other, and that's what we are here to do, is respect all opinions. I realize that. My suggestion is that we vote for those of the major majority, but we are Christians and we are a Christian faith founded under this country founded underneath Christianity, religious freedom. And I say amen to that. Thank you.
All righty. We'll make a, what's your pleasure?
Well, if I may, just one thing.
Yes. Make it quick.
Again, it's just, you know, the diversity wasn't perfect by any means itself, because like I said previously, there's people that are spiritual but are not religious, so they don't get represented. There's people that aren't religious at all. And so here they're being asked if they come into attendance possibly to pray or, and that's where,
Excuse me, Steve, they're not being asked to pray, they're just listening to it.
well,
Yep.
I guess you take it as you might.
If the prayer's for us, they're just sitting there listening to it.
And I know we know that.
Right.
But they should know that.
But
Well,
even
what
then,
about-
it's
what about-
even
Steve
within
Steve
other
has the
council.
floor
No, I'm
right
sorry.
now, please.
It's even with, other council members now, other council members in the future, and so, and that's where, I understand about wanting to give a voice. I welcome our pastors and members of the public to say a prayer, and I know a lot do at church and on their own. And we're not saying do that and stop doing that. More than welcome that. I just have never been comfortable having it as part of our meeting. And that's why, and this goes back when I was first mayor, and it's part of it, but, it just has always made me a little uncomfortable, and the only reason I brought it up now is because April 10th, we had that discussion, and like I said, what the pronouncement was at the time, so yeah, let's give that a chance. That got the letter, and thought it was worth bringing back up again.
John?
So I mean, to Chad's point, so what about me? So I sit here, there's a prayer, I attempt to be respectful, but it's coming to me and I am not a Christian. So, I mean, is there respect for me or to the letter we got from the Ministerial Association? Why only 2 spots? I'm 20% of the council, why not, if we're going to do this, maybe have the council members bring someone forward every 5th council meeting. So, and also to the problem that I said with how did the Ministerial Association become in charge? Why do we have no oversight on them? Why is that not in our ordinance?
Mary?
It's kind of, everything is overwhelming, isn't it?
Well, I mean,
I relate to you, John, I do. But if I was in your position, and I'm just talking me, and I was that uncomfortable with a prayer, I would probably not be here for the prayer.
I'm not saying I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm trying to be respectful, and I would like, as Morgan clearly stated, I would like to see other people, because I know that there are multiple people of other faiths or non-faiths in our community. I would like to see them represented here, and I've been on council for 3.5 years, and that has never happened.
Has anybody ever put
Reached
in a
out
request?
Why should they have to put in a request?
But
Why should they have to contact me to
We're
feel free to come forward
we're
here?
just going over and over and over again. I
I'll make
would
a-
entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny the ordinance in front of us tonight.
I'll second it. Call a motion. All in favor?
Discussion?
We had enough, we've been over this
But
over and
it-
over.
it's
The
par-
over and over.
Mayor, it's parliamentary procedure. Excuse me?
Yeah, that's for discussion.
Okay, correct? Am I
Discussion,
correct?
correct,
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Discussion?
Thank you.
Is there
I-
a discussion?
Huh? I have nothing else to say.
You
I
just
just
wanted
am
to-
trying to attempt to follow proper parliamentary procedure.
Well, call a motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Roll
Nay.
call. Mary?
Aye.
John?
Nay.
Steve?
Nay.
Chad?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. Motion carried. All right, moving on, setting council workshop for June 26, 2018.
Can I bring up one thing, though, with that, is who actually does, are we going to keep it under the same format or not? That's another question within this.
I think I want to clarify because I want to make sure that we're all, it's, the council has the final say. So I just want to make sure that if that's clarified, I would say,
guess.
if there's a desire from the council, I can bring forth something at the next meeting for consideration.
I would like to see something else, some other organizational method come forward.
I think that's important, too.
I think that's very important.
I would say just leave it the way it is.
But I've asked Matt to bring something forward,
Yeah.
which is my prerogative.
Sure.
Setting council workshop for June 26, 2018 at 4 o'clock.
Mayor and the
HRA
I'm sorry.
board.
Yeah, sorry. Mayor and the council, the HRA board has actually spent the last couple months doing some surveys with our local employers on housing, and they're looking at doing an application to Minnesota Housing for affordability gap funding for owner-occupied workforce housing in Hutchinson. And so they'd like to share a little bit of some of the results that they've have and kind of just, I guess, go over what they've found out and I guess seek some of the input from the city council. And so we were looking at setting that workshop for 4 p.m. on the 26th.
I'll make a motion to set that meeting.
I'll second.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to set that meeting with the HRA board. Any other discussion?
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Governance, we have Public Arts Commission minutes from April 10th, 2018. Hutch Housing and then Redevelopment Authority Board minutes from April 17th, 2018. City of Hutchinson Financial Report and Investment Report for April 2018. Planning, Zoning, Building Department first quarter reports. Planning Commission minutes from April 17th, 2018. Kent.
Yes, sir. Just a couple things project-wise. Highway 15 Main Street project, we did have our Americans with Disabilities Act meeting this morning, put on by the chamber. Fairly well attended, about 30 people, primarily business owners downtown. Yeah, good discussion and good information for those involved. The chamber does have that information available on their website, along with other information. You might be aware of this. Mary Hudson led an effort basically to put a binder together full of all sorts of information project-wise, what's been developed up to this point, ADA information, other funding grant opportunities for doorway improvements, other improvements through the EDA, what they have available. So that in its entirety is on their website if you're interested, on the chamber's website. Encourage you to take a look. And other than that, there'll be a variety of meetings starting up in early June on the streetscaping front. Citizens Advisory Group will be touching on that topic at Resource Allocation Committee. There'll be a downtown business owner meeting set up by MnDOT and the consultant on the streetscaping front. So a variety of things will go into motion. And yeah, lastly, I just want to thank Mary Hudson for really spearheading this ADA discussion. There's an opportunity that's going to be presented to some business owners that have doorway threshold steps that are less than ideal to coordinate potentially their work with the project. And it's really a good thing that we're educating business owners that there's an opportunity that does exist. With that said, MnDOT will only be going to the property line, which is in essence the building front in a lot of situations, or the building front extended. There are some alcove kind of ramp situations beyond the building or the right-of-way line, and that's really where coordination of the two improvements would be really beneficial to a property owner. Second Avenue Bridge, hopefully starting Friday, June 1st, possibly. I guess the latest we anticipate the contractor starting would be the following Monday, June 4th. We're going to try to limit traffic down there, albeit we will give people the opportunity, or if need be, to drive by the mayor's house, I guess. So, but we're going to try to discourage that. But it does, if we don't allow that, it does create quite the significant, I guess, well, detour, I guess I'll use that term. But so we'll see how things go. That section of roadway is not in the best of shape, and we realize it's going to have to be addressed shortly thereafter this project anyway, so I don't think we're going to cause any significant damage to Arch Street there, unless you beg to differ. Gary, you're familiar with.
Are you going to put a weight restriction on that?
Well, we could.
I think you should, because by that turnaround there, it's getting pretty.
Yeah, we could put something to the effect no trucks and try to discourage that and work with the Chief Hatton and the likes.
It's getting a little rough there.
Yeah, it's breaking up pretty good down by the trail.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have informed the property owner there on Arch Street about the dynamics with his access point on the 2nd Avenue at the corner of Arch and 2nd. So just a heads up to council. I have spoken to him, and staff will be meeting with him on Friday on site, and we'll put some stakes in the ground and show him the lay of the land and where the new bridge approach panel is going. And, he wants us to look at, is there any opportunity to save that access point? So I'll have that conversation with him, and then what I'll probably do is just update you guys on how that went at that point.
On that property, he has plenty of access on the east side of his property, doesn't he?
Yes,
Correct.
he has an access point on Arch Street.
That was.
Granted, he does have a nice scenario right now as far as the through movement adjacent to his garage and between his homes. So he'd have to change how he enters and leaves his garage. So, but we'll look at it with him on Friday and go from there. And then lastly, Century Avenue, we did receive comments, and from our federal aid review, we're hoping to get those. We received them this morning. We're hoping to get our plans submitted back very early tomorrow morning, and hopefully we'll be getting our advertisement in the paper next week. So if all goes well, and then that translates into probably a mid-July start date, I believe July 16th, which gives us just enough time to get the first phase done prior to Ridgewater resuming or commencing their fall semester on Monday, August 27th. So we still got time, and yeah, we'll go from there. And then one last thing, and
Last thing was the last thing.
I'm going to compliment you, Mark. I want to thank Mark and John Paulson on the right-of-way ordinance and telecom ordinance front. That's been a lot of work, and Mark's put a fair amount of time into it. John's put a lot of time into it, and staff also. Matt, myself, Dan Jochum have sat in meetings also. So
I think it's about 2 years on.
yeah, so yeah, it's been a lot of time spent. But I wanted to thank Mark and John.
Can I ask you one question?
Yep.
It's more for Dan, but maybe you know, or Matt, the KFC project. Have you heard anything with that?
I haven't heard anything.
I talked to Dan a couple weeks ago. He was anticipating they'd get going here once the weather was nice. I don't know.
It's Century Court Apartments too.
Yeah, I would assume
I don't
any day now that they get
Well,
going. So,
but I know BNC had bid it, and the prices have gone up so high that they have to rebid it. So I wonder if it's even going to happen.
Is that it, Ken?
That is it.
Oh, it's nice that you Columboed us once again. That's good.
Thanks to Mark.
Mark, Got anything?
I did have one thing tonight.
Oh, jeez.
You might recall this past fall, you had declared the property at 141 Fifth Avenue Northeast as a hazardous building.
Yes?
We've gone through the statutory procedure of getting that stuff before court. We've notified the property owner and the property caretaker. There's been no response from anybody, so it's set on for default judgment hearing on May 31st. Hopefully the judge will sign off on allowing us to demolish the building.
Except then there's how long of a period before we can actually do it? Or wasn't there kind of a period with Water Street even?
Right, well, in the order that you guys promulgated this past fall, the landowner's given 20 days after that court hearing to demolish it themselves.
Okay.
Then we can, and then assess the property.
Or challenge the court.
Yeah, the Water Street one was
Right.
unique because that had a couple of challenges, and that's why it took longer.
It only took 6 years.
Yeah.
No big deal.
You're gonna displace all those critters.
Well, someone will.
Yeah. Anything else, Mark?
That's it.
Think. Mary?
Well, Memorial Day's coming up. Day to honor our veterans and those that have passed, so
Those that have passed, yeah.
do that. Also, I wanted to thank the volunteers and the city who went around this morning. Early this morning, they were out and they were planting all the pots within the city. You know, it takes a village, and this village steps up every year, so thank you for that. And Steve, on the art sculptures,
Yeah.
you can update us on that, when more are coming in.
Yep, one is going in tomorrow, I believe, and then the rest will be on Friday. So by the end of the week, they'll all be in place, so.
To that point, I had a gentleman today say, do we have a casino in town? Why do you have dice on Main Street? He liked the Hutchinson brothers and the police sculpture, but he didn't like all this goofy artwork in town. So,
I had a 3-year-old constituent that lives at my house that was pissed that the dragon went away. So,
About the horse.
They always have a horse.
yeah. He hasn't seen the horse yet, but I'll report back.
Oh, it's cool.
Anything else, Mary?
Nope, that's it.
Chad?
I don't have anything left tonight.
Oh, Steve?
Mosquito spraying starts tonight, right? You didn't mention that. I got an email or a text message.
You're exactly right.
So,
I haven't noticed them, so thanks a lot.
I think John might have, yeah, I don't know.
got to suspend it or not?
I don't know. What are you seeing for counts? I guess you guys would know more than me.
I know it was in the paper that they were gonna, I think, start this week.
Yeah,
but maybe the
this was
counts
the
are,
identified date per contract by all means.
but maybe the counts are down to where they.
Did you get
Yeah.
that? Yeah. I got a call on my phone saying they were gonna be spraying.
Okay, we're starting tonight then.
With the election and the filing, I was just wondering if our candidate, the incumbents would give an announcement if they're going to run again or not.
I filed today.
That's affirmative.
I'll file tomorrow.
Yeah, I filed today.
All right. It's just good for everybody to know. And I guess the only other thing I had was, last week or last meeting talked about concern about people transporting wood into the campground. Well, the DNR is actually stepping up ban into state parks and campgrounds as well, just for the same reason with the Emerald Ash Borer. So I think it's something we really have to think about doing in some form or strengthening. Right now, people aren't supposed to be bringing in wood that isn't certified, but it's pretty loose, and the only place it's really mentioned is when they go to reserve campsite online, and you got to read through everything, obviously.
I know, I talked with Golf about getting the sign out there, and I'm not sure if it's up yet, or I know it's coming, so.
I noticed they have it at Super America. They have wood.
So does Senex.
Senex too.
Holiday,
Okay.
so it's around. Maybe that could be added on the signs too, you know, possible
available at,
locations or
yeah.
something. I don't know, if it's not too hard or. Thanks, that's all.
Yep, thanks, Steve. John?
Well, since Mark had something to say, I wasn't going to say anything. I just wanted to note that Doug Hanneman is retiring from the paper on the 31st of May. So, don't know who that new editor is going to be yet, do we? So,
All right, that it, John?
That's it.
Matt?
Couple things, well, as Steve noted, the filing did open today. We actually have 3 people that have filed. So, I did get an email late this afternoon from the chamber saying that they were going to be going ahead to apply for the pheasant opener. So, and they said they'd probably get in touch with us. I know we've shared with them our willingness to assist them with that, so I'm looking for that. Obviously, offices are closed on Monday for Memorial Day. And as Kent had noted, just a quick reminder, we do have a streetscape workshop before our next council meeting on the 12th. And then lastly, the League of Minnesota Cities Conference is June 20th to the 22nd, so that's coming up. I haven't signed anybody up yet. I know there's been some interest in going, so.
You signed up.
What's that?
Didn't you sign up?
I haven't signed up anybody yet. I'm planning on going. I just want to, it's kind of waiting to get confirmation from you guys if you're going. So you don't necessarily need to tell me tonight, but if you are planning on going, just let me know. So it's in St. Cloud this year. That's it.
Steve, on I guess on real life in Hutchinson, so it's got to be true, right? The thing for the Arts Walk?
Sorry, the art walk?
The Art Walk, has that been updated where the sculptures are and stuff? I don't know.
We don't have a new brochure yet because we have somebody take photos when they come in, and so that's going to get done, and then they'll get distributed out there, so if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, because somebody asked me, said, well, it's the one on the deal and it hasn't been updated for a while, so I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, just as soon as we get the new photos, we'll get the website as well as the new brochures updated. Can I just, one quick thing?
Yeah.
Just for everybody's notice, you know, I brought up the invocation and that'll be it, you know, for me. I feel like I had the opportunity to raise my concerns and people listened, and we can agree to disagree, but, you know, that was the decision that was made, and I'll respect that as well. So, but I do appreciate if Matt can look at other opportunities.
And I will say this, and, you know, looking at it, and, you know, even in regards to the letter that we had, we should have a formal policy in place. You know, because all it says right now is just we're giving an invocation. You know, we've always stated as staff that we are not going to discriminate against anybody from coming and giving that, but we should have that in a written policy. And so that will be my goal, is give you guys options on how you want to go about filling those slots in the future.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah. Nothing else? Anything else for the good of the Hutchinson city? Adjournment's in order then.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Mary to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.